I devoted my whole life to my family, but when I needed them the most, they pushed me out of the house I built. When they realize their mistake, will I be able to forgive them, or will I walk away forever? It had been 47 days since my husband died. Not that anyone was still counting except me. I sat alone at the corner of the garden we once tended together, hands trembling as I traced the worn lines of the old wooden bench. My husband built it the year we moved into this house, our first and only home, a modest two-story in the suburbs, wrapped in ivy and memory. Now it stood like me, aged, weathered, and fading into the background. The house was suddenly too quiet. No cough echoing from the hallway, no rustle of newspaper, no voice calling my name in the morning, just the ticking of the clock that reminded me how loud absence can be. I wasn't surprised when my son and his wife started dropping by, more often not to mourn, but to help manage things. Catherine, my daughter-in-law, always came with folders, spreadsheets, and that thin smile that never reached her eyes. "Mom," she said one morning, her red lipstick perfect, even at 9 a.m., "you shouldn't be alone right now. Why don't you let us take care of the house?" I nodded, not because I agreed, but because grief had swallowed my voice whole. Saying no felt heavier than carrying the silence. Catherine took my nod as consent. From that day on, the living room became her meeting room. My husband's reading chair was replaced with a standing lamp from IKEA. She started bringing contractors in to modernize the place, she said. The creaking wood of our kitchen floor was too embarrassing. My teacups were too dated. Even the curtains were replaced. I stayed quiet. Even when they moved my things upstairs into the smallest room. Even when I found my wedding album stacked behind detergent in the laundry cupboard. Grief doesn't just make you sad, it makes you small. Shrinks your world into a corner, into silence, into survival. At night, I would sit on the edge of my new bed, a mattress too soft in a room too cold, and trace the faded wedding ring on my finger. My son Michael rarely looked me in the eye anymore. Maybe because every time he did, he saw the reflection of the man he used to be before Catherine started whispering in his ear. Still, I believed he loved me. I told myself he was just confused, hurt, pressured, that he would come around. But then came the night of the family dinner. It was meant to be a small gathering, just the three of us. I spent the afternoon making chicken stew, Michael's childhood favorite. I even set the table in the formal dining room like we used to during holidays. But they never came to the table. I heard laughter from the living room, wine glasses, clinking, music playing from Catherine's phone. I walked in and saw them with her friends, a full dinner catered and plated. "Oh," Catherine said, catching sight of me, "we didn't think you'd be up for company." Then she turned back to her wine. I stood there holding a spoon in my hand, steam rising from the stew I had made with trembling fingers and quiet hope. No one looked at me again. Later that night, I packed the leftover stew into small containers. I placed one in the fridge with a note, "Michael, I made this for you. Your favorite." The note was gone the next morning, but the stew was untouched. The lawyers came the next week. "We're just preparing the estate," Catherine said briskly. "It's best to make things official now, less hassle later." She smiled again, that smile that always smelled of control. I watched as papers were passed across the dining table. Michael didn't say much. He just signed where she pointed. I sat quietly like a ghost, watching strangers dismantle her life. That weekend, I found my sewing machine boxed in the garage. The quilt I had been making for Michael's birthday, stitched with old shirts of his childhood, was folded beneath a broken lamp. No one asked, no one cared. But I kept stitching at night anyway. Not the quilt, but something inside me. A tear that had been forming ever since the funeral. It was slow, painful work, but I could feel it, my voice, my worth coming back stitch by stitch. One night, I stood in the kitchen heating water for tea when Catherine walked in. She didn't look at me. She was on her phone barking orders to someone. But then she saw my tea kettle, the old brass one my husband gave me for our 20th anniversary. "We really need to declutter," she muttered. "That thing looks ancient." She reached for it, and that was the moment something in me changed. I moved faster than I thought I could, wrapping my hand around the kettle before hers touched it. Our eyes locked. For the first time, I didn't look away. It's mine, I said quietly. She blinked. Excuse me, I said it's mine. My voice surprised even me. It was soft but steady, like a string pulled tight. A whisper from the woman I used to be. Catherine scoffed and left the room, but I stood there, hands wrapped around the kettle like it was the last piece of my life that hadn't been taken. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I made tea, and I started making a plan. It began with whispers, like wind beneath the door, soft and sly. I'd walk past the kitchen and hear them, Michael and Catherine, lowering their voices just as I entered. Glances would pass between them like coded messages, and then the subject would change. My late husband, Robert, used to say, "When people stop speaking to you and start speaking around you, something is being taken." He was right. One evening, I overheard them speaking in the study. I was walking upstairs when I heard Catherine say sharply, "She doesn't need to live here, Michael. She's old. This isn't a care home." Michael sighed. "She's my mother." "She was your mother," Catherine snapped. "Now she's just a liability." I stopped breathing. A liability. That word lingered in my lungs like smoke. I went back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat down. For a long time, I stared at the walls. Not thinking, just existing. A week later, Catherine walked in with a woman I had never seen before. Mid-40s, crisp suit, cold perfume. "This is Samantha," Catherine announced. "She's a real estate consultant. We're starting the transition process for the house." I frowned. "Transition?" Catherine gave a bright, patronizing smile. "Yes, you'll be moving to a place more suited for your needs. It's near a lake. Very peaceful." Michael wasn't there. He was away on a work trip or so, I was told. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. "You're selling the house," Catherine tilted her head the way one might look at a stubborn dog. "Well, not exactly. We're restructuring, consolidating. You wouldn't understand." I stood up. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, quieter than I intended, but firm. Samantha looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, you really don't have a choice if the title's being transferred." What Catherine's eyes sparkled. "Michael and I are the primary title holders now. Your name's no longer on the deed." The room tilted. My legs almost gave out, but I caught myself on the edge of the table. She kept going. "It was all part of the asset division paperwork. You signed it, remember, after the funeral. The folders, the meetings, the documents I was too grief-numb to read. I had trusted them. A betrayal that cut not like a knife, but like something worse, deliberate, patient, and clean." That night, I searched through my desk drawers and old folders. I found a yellow copy of the agreement legalese dancing across the page like a foreign language. I flipped to the last page. My signature. My husband's name had been crossed out. A few days later, Catherine called a family meeting. Michael had returned. He looked exhausted, distracted, and strangely quiet. Catherine did the talking. She laid out the plan like a business proposal. They'd lease out the property, use the income to support my retirement. In the meantime, they'd found a small senior studio for me in a building nearby. "One room, no kitchen, but it's all you need," she said with a smile. I asked Michael, "You agreed to this?" He didn't meet my eyes. Catherine grew impatient. "Look, we've done everything for you. This house was going to fall apart anyway. You should be grateful we're handling this." "And your son is on board?" I asked her. "Oh, Michael understands what needs to be done," she said, stroking his arm possessively. "It's time you accepted that you're not the center of everything anymore." That night, I quietly began packing. Not my clothes, my documents. I still had the receipts, the emails, the bank transactions. I still had the will Robert drafted 6 years ago, and I still had the contact card of his old attorney, but that would come later. The next morning, I woke to banging on my door. Catherine stood there, arms crossed. "We've arranged for a mover to pick up your things today." I looked at her. "Today?" She nodded, smug. "You'll be in by lunch." I stepped past her and walked downstairs. Boxes were already stacked by the front door. My sewing machine, my books, the photo frame with my wedding picture wrapped haphazardly in newspaper. I walked into the kitchen. Two strange men were disassembling my dining table. "Catherine," I said, my voice tight, "you had no right to touch my belongings." She shrugged. "Technically, they're household items. Michael and I are the primary residents now." I turned to my son, who had just walked in from the garage. "Michael," I said, "tell them to stop." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom, it's for the best. You'll be more comfortable in the new place." I walked up to him close enough to smell the guilt on his breath. "You're not doing this for me," I said. "You're doing it because it's easier than confronting her." He winced. Catherine stepped in. "Enough. The Uber's here. You need to go." "I'm not taking an Uber," I said coldly. "Yes," she snapped. "You are." She reached into her pocket and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single key labeled Unit 8C Silver Pines. No note, no apology, no explanation. Just a key. They didn't help me with the bags. I stood outside with a small suitcase and a plastic tub of kitchen items, the only things they hadn't packed. The Uber driver looked confused. "Just you?" I nodded. As we pulled away, I looked back at my house, and saw Catherine on the porch waving at the movers. Michael didn't come out. The senior studio was smaller than any hotel room I'd ever been in. It smelled of bleach and lemon-scented lies. The bed was too low, the walls were too thin. The woman next door had a television that never stopped playing true crime documentaries. I sat down and stared at the one window that overlooked a parking lot. I had nothing, but I also had something they didn't know. I had time, I had memory, and I had something far more dangerous than resentment. I had patience. I woke up every morning to the sound of the parking lot's hum cars, starting engines, idling tires, crunching over the gravel. There was no birdsong here, no comforting hum of life, just the noise of people rushing through their own small, meaningless worlds. The first few days, I felt a strange detachment from the world around me. The apartment with its beige walls and broken blinds felt like a tomb, a place where the life I used to know could never return. But I kept my head down. I did what I had always done. I cooked my meals, if you could call it that, simple things enough to get by. I made soup, I boiled potatoes, and when I wasn't preparing food or staring out of my single window, I kept busy with something else. It wasn't much, but it was all I had left my memory. My husband's legal files, his old photographs, the old family account books, things that Michael and Catherine had never paid attention to. I began organizing them, not with a sense of urgency, but with a quiet resolve. Everything was in order. Robert had kept everything meticulously, in a box carefully labeled estate documents. There was the deed to the house, the one they thought had been signed over. There were the bank statements, the offshore accounts Robert had hidden for years, things Catherine would never have dreamed of finding. I knew Catherine's ambition. I'd seen it when she first entered our lives. She'd always been the perfect daughter-in-law on the surface, always smiling, always offering to help, but that had been a mask. Underneath, she was hungry for more than just my husband's assets. She wanted control, and she had it, at least she thought she did. But now I had the time, I had the memories, and I had a sense of power that no one could take from me. I wasn't just an old woman shuffled off into a corner. I wasn't someone who could be ignored. I was still the matriarch of this family, the one who had built everything with Robert, the one who had kept things together. It was almost 2 weeks before Michael called. I was sitting at the small dining table, sipping tea from my chipped cup. The phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't recognize the number. I let it ring. But then it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. "Mom." Michael's voice sounded distant. Are you okay?" I didn't answer him right away. I sat still, feeling the silence hang between us. "I'm fine, Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How are you?" I don't know," he replied, his voice trailing off. "Look, things are a mess. Catherine, well, she's been putting a lot of pressure on me, and, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us." I said nothing. "Can we talk?" he continued. "I want to make this right. I know I should have done better by you." I almost laughed, but I didn't. It was too painful. I swallowed the bitterness that had been building up in my chest. I don't need you to fix anything, Michael, I said quietly. It's too late for that. Mom! His voice broke. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. Catherine, she didn't let me think straight. I could hear him, could feel the guilt in his words, but it didn't matter. It didn't change what had been done. It didn't change how much I had lost. I've been thinking too, I said, and for the first time I allowed my voice to rise slightly. You've been very clear about what you want, Michael. It's just that you didn't realize what you had. There was silence on the other end. I don't need your apologies, I continued. What I need is respect. What I need is to be seen for who I am. I hung up before he could say another word. That afternoon, I drove to the local bank, the one I had been to with Robert countless times to deposit checks, to take out small withdrawals, to make sure everything was in order. They still recognized me there, still remembered my face. The clerk smiled, her eyes warm. Mrs. Hayes, how are you today? I'm here to make a request, I said, sitting down. I need to check on my accounts. She didn't question me. She didn't ask why. She simply went to work pulling up my files on the computer. I watched her fingers dance over the keys, her face neutral. And just to be clear, I said, watching her closely, I want access to all of my funds, all of them. No restrictions. Her eyes flicked up at me, a moment of hesitation. Mrs. Hayes, there are some complications. There was a change in your account. Your husband's business holdings were transferred. I'm aware, I said, not letting her finish. I'm also aware that I've been kept in the dark, but I'm not here to ask questions. I'm here to take back what's mine. That night I sat in the tiny studio reviewing the documents, the financials, the paperwork Robert had left me, the stocks, the savings, the investments that I had never bothered to look at until now. I had always trusted my husband, trusted him to take care of things. But now I knew the truth. Catherine didn't know the extent of it. She thought she was taking it all. She thought she had sealed her victory. What she didn't know was that there was much more than she could imagine, millions hidden in ways that couldn't be touched. No one would find it, no one except me. I wasn't going to rush. This had to be done carefully, silently. 2 days later, I went to the lawyer's office. I had made an appointment under a false name, one that even Michael wouldn't recognize. He wasn't expecting me. None of them were. The lawyer was a stout man in his late 50s, gray hair, sharp eyes. He took one look at me and knew who I was. He must have seen the resolve in my face because he didn't ask questions. I need to revise my will, I said, sliding the papers across the desk. He didn't flinch. He just nodded, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper. We can do that. I want full control of the assets again, I said, voice low, but sure. No more agreements, no more lies. He smiled, a small, knowing smile. Of course, Mrs. Hayes. The weeks passed slowly, but the tension built layer by layer. I was silent, I was patient, and I was ready. A week after my visit to the lawyer's office, I received a call from Michael. Mom, I need to talk to you. Catherine's been on me about this, about you. I didn't respond at first. My fingers were still wrapped around the cold handle of the envelope, the one with my revised will, the one that had been signed, sealed, and sent to the lawyer, the one that would change everything. Michael, I said quietly, I don't think there's anything left to talk about. Mom, you're just so different lately. I've been thinking a lot about what's happened. And I think I've made a huge mistake. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the chair. Tell Catherine I'm not interested, I said, my voice colder than I meant. There was silence on the other end, and then Michael spoke again. Mom, please, don't do this. I know you're angry, but this is family. We can work through this. Family. It was a word I had heard too often in the last few weeks, but it had never felt more hollow. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to re-enter the story, to rewrite it, to make me feel guilty, to make me question myself. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I've made my decision, I said, and you'll soon understand why. The call ended abruptly, but it didn't matter. I had already made up my mind. The following days were spent preparing. I spent hours at the lawyer's office finalizing everything, ensuring that my name would be restored, that my property and my rights, everything that had been stripped from me, would be put back in place. Catherine had played her hand too early. She thought she was in control, but now I was the one holding all the cards. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, about dignity, about taking back what was rightfully mine. The following week, I arranged a meeting, a private one, with Michael, and for the first time, Catherine. The day arrived. I met them at the old office building downtown, a place they wouldn't expect. Michael and Catherine were already seated when I arrived, their faces tense. Catherine's eyes narrowed when she saw me, but I didn't flinch. I was prepared for this. Mom, Michael said, standing as I entered. "We've been talking." "Really?" I said, taking a seat across from them. "How nice." "So what's the conclusion?" Catherine opened her mouth to speak, but Michael raised his hand, signaling for her to wait. "Mom," he started, his voice strained. "Catherine and we've been discussing things. About the house, the assets, and, well, I think we've both agreed that you should come back to the house. That's what we want. We want things to go back to how they were." I sat back, staring at him. The silence hung between us. "I don't want to go back to the house," I said, my voice steady. "Not to live there. Not under those conditions. Not with you or her." Catherine's lips twitched into a smile, but it was cold. "What are you suggesting?" Then she asked, her voice cutting through the tension. "You want us to just hand everything back to you, just like that?" I didn't smile. I simply pulled out the envelope. "I'm suggesting," I said calmly, "that you both sign these papers." Catherine's eyes darted to the envelope, and I could see the confusion flicker in her eyes. She had no idea what was coming. "What's this?" Michael asked, his voice rising slightly. "What are you talking about?" I opened the envelope slowly, my fingers gliding over the crisp paper. I slid a document across the table toward him. "This is the revised will. The new power of attorney. The one that gives me full control over the assets, including the house." Michael froze, staring at the document. Catherine's smile faltered. "No," she whispered almost too softly. "No, you can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious, Catherine," I said. "I'm very serious. You both thought you could push me around. You thought you could force me out. But now I hold all the power." Michael's face was pale. He stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly. You've been planning this all along?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer him right away. I let the question hang in the air. And then I said, "I didn't plan it, Michael. I had no choice. You left me with nothing. So now I'm taking everything back." Catherine stood up, knocking the chair over in her haste. "This is outrageous," she yelled, her voice sharp and cold. "You can't do this. We are family. You're supposed to trust us." I remained seated, calm, unyielding. "I trusted you with everything," I said quietly, "and you betrayed me. All of you. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Catherine took a step toward me, her eyes burning with anger. "You'll regret this, old woman. You think you can just take it all back? You think Michael will let you walk all over him?" I stood up, then meeting her gaze. "I'm not walking over anyone. I'm simply taking what's mine, something you'll never understand." Michael's voice cracked. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see how things were going. I thought you thought she was more important than me." I interrupted, my voice cold. His shoulders slumped. He looked down at the papers, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. "Yes," he said, his voice barely audible. "I thought she was." The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. Catherine's gaze shifted from me to Michael, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You've lost it," she said bitterly. "Everything we've built. Gone. Everything you built." I corrected her, my voice sharp. "Not us. You." Michael didn't respond. He sat in his chair, his face pale, his hands clenched tightly together. I took the papers back and slid them into the envelope, sealing them. I've already spoken with the bank. The house is mine again. I will be overseeing the management of the assets from now on. If you want to continue living in the house, you'll be paying rent. I will be in control from now on. I stood up ready to leave, but stopped when I reached the door. I don't want to see either of you again unless you're willing to treat me with the respect I deserve, I said quietly. I'm done being your pawn. This is my life now. As I walked out of the office building, I felt the weight of the last few weeks lifting from my shoulders. I had reclaimed control. I had taken back what was mine. It wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had won. A month passed since that meeting. The papers had been signed. The power had shifted, and my life had started again. But even with all the control, all the assets, and all the decisions in my hands, there was still an emptiness, a hole that the money could not fill. Every day I sat in my studio apartment and I felt the absence of what had been. I couldn't help but wonder if things could have been different. If my family could have been different. If Michael had only listened, had only seen me for who I really was, rather than the woman he wanted me to be. If he had only respected the sacrifices I made for him, for them, for this family. But it was too late for that now. The phone rang one afternoon while I was sitting at the small kitchen table staring out the window at the passing cars. It was Michael. I didn't answer right away. I had never been the type to hold grudges, but what had happened, what they had done to me, was something I couldn't simply let go of. I wasn't angry anymore. No, I was past that. But there was a deep, aching sadness in my heart. A sadness for all the years I had spent trying to be what they needed. A sadness for the love I thought was unbreakable, the family I thought would always be there. I picked up the phone. Hello, Mom? Please? Michael's voice cracked. Please, can we talk? I didn't respond immediately. I didn't even know what to say. I'm sorry. He continued, his voice breaking. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about you. And Catherine? Well, she's not the same. I don't know what happened to her. I sighed, feeling the weight of his words sink in. What do you want, Michael? I asked softly. I want to come by. I need to see you. Please. I hesitated. The silence stretched on for a few moments. Finally, I spoke. Fine. You can come by. But only if you're ready to listen. No more excuses. The knock came an hour later. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, his eyes bloodshot. His clothes wrinkled as if he hadn't slept in days. He looked lost, tired. Smaller somehow, like the weight of everything he had done had finally caught up with him. I didn't invite him in. Instead, I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I've been thinking about everything he said, his voice low. And I know I can't undo what happened. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. I didn't see it at the time, but now I know I hurt you. And Catherine, I said, cutting him off. You've always chosen her over me. Michael looked down. I didn't want to, Mom. I really didn't. She has a way of convincing me that what she's doing is right. But now I see that I was wrong. I was blind. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had cried too much already. You're right, I said, my voice tight. You were blind, but you're not anymore. And that's the hardest part of it all. You had the choice, Michael. You had the choice to stand by me. And you didn't. I know, he whispered, shaking his head. I know. I can't change it. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Not just with you, but with the family. Can we start over? I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long while. The man who had once been my pride, my joy. The boy I had raised, who had grown into this stranger standing before me so full of regret and so desperate for redemption. I took a deep breath. I don't know, Michael, I said. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Not until I see that you've changed. that you truly understand what you've done, and I need time. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. I swear. I'll prove it." There was a long pause. Then in a quiet voice I said, "It's too late for us to go back to how things were. But maybe we can find a way forward, together, but only if you're truly willing to see the truth, to see me." He nodded, his face filled with so much emotion that it almost broke me. "I understand," he said softly. "I'll do anything. I just want to fix it. I just want to make it right." I stood there, my heart heavy. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I hadn't lost everything. Not yet. A week passed before Michael called again. This time he didn't ask to meet. He just left a message. "I've been thinking about everything we talked about, and I understand. I'll respect your space, Mom. But I wanted to tell you something. I've made arrangements. I'm going to help with the house. I'm going to pay rent just like you said. I don't expect anything from you in return. I just want to show you that I'm trying." I didn't call back. I didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. This time it wasn't Michael. It was a delivery, an envelope marked with the official letterhead of my bank. Inside was a check, a large one, a transfer from Michael's personal account. The amount $1 million. With it there was a note. "Mom, this is for the house. I know I can't make up for what I did, but I want to start making things right. Please let this be a step in the right direction." I sat down at the kitchen table, the check in my hands, and I stared at it. $1 million. The amount that could pay for the house, for everything I had lost, and yet the emptiness I had felt for so long still lingered. I didn't need his money, not really. But maybe this was the beginning of a change. Not just for Michael, but for me as well. A change in how I viewed family, how I viewed my own worth. That evening, Michael came by a little hesitantly. He handed me a simple bouquet of flowers. No grand apologies, no expectations. Just a gesture. "I know this doesn't fix anything," he said, "but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. For you. For us." I took the flowers, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything I had hoped for. But it was a start. And sometimes that's all we can ask for, a start. As I stood there, holding the flowers in my hands, I realized something. This wasn't the ending I had imagined, but it was mine. It was my story. And it wasn't over yet. For the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of peace. A quiet understanding that life could begin anew no matter how far we'd fallen. It might not be what I had dreamed of, but it was enough. It was more than enough. And as for the rest, I would decide that in my own time. The days after Michael's last visit were a blur of quiet reflection. I spent my time in the small studio, going through old photographs and memories, things I had never had the heart to touch since Robert passed. Each picture seemed to pull me further back in time, reminding me of the years spent building this life of love, of loss, and of the strange, painful journey that had led me here. And still, the one thing that kept me from feeling whole was the sense that something was missing. The money, no, the house, not entirely. It was something deeper, something inside me that couldn't be filled by anything tangible. I didn't see Michael again for a few days after the bouquet. He'd called a couple of times, left messages, but I wasn't ready to speak to him. Not yet. I wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but neither was I willing to shut him out forever. I was still trying to figure out what it meant to move forward, what it meant to heal. The call came on a Sunday afternoon. It was Michael again. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything, and I know I haven't said this enough, but I'm proud of you, for everything you've done, for how strong you are." His voice was soft, but there was something different in it now, a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I've learned something from all of this, about myself, about what matters, and I want to make sure you know that. I want to be a better son to you, for the rest of my life." The words hit me harder than I expected. In that moment, I realized something I had tried to ignore for so long. I had been holding on to my pain, not just because of what Michael and Catherine had done to me, but because of the hurt I had carried inside myself for years. The loneliness, the feeling that I wasn't important anymore, the belief that I didn't matter. But now, in his words, in his promise, I saw a glimmer of the son I had raised, the son who had once laughed with me, who had once trusted me with all his heart. And in that moment, I let go of some of that weight. It wasn't a total release, but it was a start. "I'm proud of you too, Michael," I said quietly, my voice unsteady. "And I'm glad you've realized what's important. But this isn't just about money, or property, or what's in the bank. It's about being there for each other. It's about respect." "I know, Mom. I understand. I'm going to show you. I'll make it right." I spent the following days in quiet contemplation. I didn't rush. I didn't force anything. I simply let the moments pass, like the steady flow of water in a river. There was no need to act out of anger, out of spite. My heart, heavy as it still was, had begun to soften. One evening, I received another call. This time, it was Catherine. "Can I come by?" Her voice was tentative, softer than usual. "I need to talk to you. I I don't know how else to say this, but I want to apologize." I was taken aback. Catherine had never been one to admit fault. She was always the one who pushed, always the one who manipulated, always the one who made everything seem like it was my fault. But this was different. This was real. I didn't hesitate. "Come over." When she arrived, Catherine looked different. Her hair wasn't styled, her makeup was minimal, and she wore no jewelry. She looked vulnerable. It was a side of her I had never seen before. We sat across from each other in the small apartment, the silence stretching out between us. "I've been horrible to you," she started, her voice small. "I've been cruel. I've been selfish. And I don't know what came over me. All I've ever wanted was control. And I let that blind me. I hurt you. And I'm sorry." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. The apology felt genuine, but it also felt like the last thing I needed. I had spent so many years being hurt by her that hearing her say these words I never thought she'd speak was both relieving and painful. Because it didn't change what had happened. It didn't take back the damage. "I never meant for things to go so far," she continued. I thought if I pushed you out, I could have everything. But I see now that it's not worth it. Not without family. Not without you." I looked at her, her words hanging in the air. "You can't undo what's been done, Catherine," I said quietly but firmly. "What's done is done. But you can start making it right. You can start by being honest. With me. With yourself." She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I will, I promise. I'll do better." Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Slowly, imperceptibly. But they shifted. Michael came by more often, not with apologies, but with actions. He spent time with me. We talked. He shared his thoughts, his concerns. And most importantly, he listened. For the first time in years, we were communicating, really communicating. And for the first time, I saw the man he was becoming, rather than the boy he used to be. Catherine, too, made an effort. She didn't come around often, but when she did, there was no pretense. There was no manipulation. She was different, and though I wasn't sure how much I could trust her, I could see that she was trying. One afternoon, Michael called again. This time there was no desperation in his voice. There was no guilt. There was just peace. "Mom, we've decided something," he said. "Catherine and I want you to come back. We want you to live in the house. Not as a guest, not as someone who's been pushed to the side, but as family, your home, your place." I sat down slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. This was the offer I had been waiting for. The offer that years ago I would have jumped at. But now things were different. I was different. "I appreciate that, Michael," I said softly, "but I don't need to live in the house to be a part of this family. I just need to be respected. That's all." "I know, Mom," he replied. "And I've learned that. I've learned that nothing matters more than respect and love and family. I smiled, my heart lightening just a little. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were no grand reconciliations, no tearful moments of forgiveness that healed all wounds. But there was something quieter, something more lasting. There was peace. I had taken back what was mine. Not just the money, the house, or the assets, but my dignity, my voice, my right to be heard. And for the first time in years, I felt free. As I sat on the porch of my small apartment, the evening sky stretched out before me, a canvas of soft pink and gold. I thought about the life I had lived, the family I had built, the family that had fallen apart, and the family that was slowly, cautiously beginning to come back together. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was enough. And for now, that was all I needed.